Now that we've looked at mollusks, let's look at another group of protostomes, the arthropods. The arthropods contain a lot of different familiar groups, including Chelicerata, the crustaceans, and the insects. First, let's discuss some basic anatomy of arthropods. Arthropods have what's called an exoskeleton. In having an exoskeleton, they must shed their skin in order to grow. We call this exdiasis. Chitin is a polymer that makes the exoskeleton. Through scleratinization, proteins are cross-linked with chitin to harden parts of the exoskeleton. Since this is technically a tanning process, the hardest parts of the exoskeleton are often darker. You can see this in the mouth parts on the bottom right. In this organism's mandibles, the points that are used most often for cutting and chewing are also hardened. You can tell they're hardened because they're darker. You can also see scleratinized spikes on the legs, which are used for protection. Because they're darker, you know that they're also harder. These contain cross-linked proteins. Within Arthropoda are several different subphylum. Trilobita is an interesting group. This is the only group of organisms we'll talk about that is completely extinct. Since trilobites had such a strong exoskeleton, many of them can be found in the fossil record. Another subphylum are the cheliceraforms. Within that is the class Meristomata, the horseshoe crabs. We already discussed horseshoe crabs when we talked about blood. Remember that horseshoe crabs have blue blood that's used in the medical industry. Another class of cheliceraforms are the arachnids. While the arachnids include the spiders, they also include a few other groups that you may not be familiar with. On the bottom right is the sulfugid. The sulfugids are called the wind scorpions, and they're very fast hunters. They don't have venom, they just use speed and the strength of those chelicera to overpower their prey. On the top right you can see a sulfugid in a defense posture. They look scarier than they are, and there's a lot of urban legends surrounding sulfugids. On the bottom left is a vinegaroon. This is another kind of arachnid. Again, vinegaroons aren't particularly dangerous, but they look pretty intimidating. They do produce a vinegar-like secretion that's harmless to humans. And lastly, we have an amblypygid. These are called the tailless whip scorpions. Amblypygids are incredibly fast. You might be familiar with amblypygids as they made a cameo in one of the Harry Potter movies. They are presented as a deadly organism, but in reality, they're completely harmless. Scorpions are another group of arachnids that you're probably familiar with. Something you may not know about scorpions is that their exoskeleton biofluoresces. What's up?
Yeah.
I'm Sale from Young Prophet, and this is a huge scorpion. Look at the size of this thing. Scorpions have an interesting property in their exoskeleton where if you expose them to UV light, they fluoresce. It's biofluorescence. So what we're going to do is turn off our lights and then turn on this UV light, and we should be able to see it fluoresce. And there it is. Can you see it? Yeah, fairly obvious. And it looks like a camera trick, but it's not. This is exactly what we're seeing. It looks like it's glowing by hand in this crazy kind of greenish yellow color. The subphylum Hexapoda contains the class Insecta. I showed a mosquito for Insecta because mosquitoes have an incredible relationship with human health. Mosquitoes are the vector for malaria, which causes up to 2.7 million deaths each year. We'll briefly go through several orders within Hexapoda. The first is Odonata, the dragonflies and the damselflies. Odonates are aerial predators that have two sets of wings. The next order are the orthopterans, the grasshoppers, the crickets, and the katydids. Katydids form a foundational source of nutrition for many animals in the rainforest.
An army ant killing a pterogenid, and they're going to eat it.
The next order are the hemipterans. These include the true bugs, the aphids, and the stink bugs. The next order is Coleoptera, the beetles. The next order is Lepidoptera, the moths and the butterflies. The next order are the dipterans, the flies. And finally, we have Hymenoptera, the bees and wasps. We're not going to discuss all of these groups, but we'll talk about a few of them that have important consequences in human health or human culture. The first is Hemiptera. Hemipterans have piercing, sucking mouthparts. Hemipterans pass many plant diseases between plants. Because they spread diseases, they're economically important to farmers. They also pass diseases between humans. In the center you can see a bedbug and a person who's had several bedbug bites along their back. Here's an example of some overlap between hemipterans and human culture. This plant is called Opuntia. It's a cactus, also known as the nopal plant. If you've ever had nopales, it's made from these plants. Cochineal is a small hemipteran that grows on the petals of these cactus. When dried, you can smash up these hemipterans and make an incredibly rich dye. This cochineal dye has a strong relationship with human culture in Mesoamerica. The next group we'll talk about are the coleopterans, or the beetles. Beetles make up the largest order of insects. Beetles feature elytra, which are sclerotinized front wings. The elytra protect the flight wings. In this example on the right, a ladybird beetle was given a prosthetic clear elytra in order to see how the wing folded underneath. The buprestid beetles are a group that are important in human culture. Their elytra are often used in jewelry. Here you can see a modern piece of jewelry created from the elytra of buprestids. Here's another example of earrings made from the elytra of beetles. These earrings are worn by the Shuar people of South America. If you plan a future in forensics, you're probably going to have to be familiar with several different groups of insects. Rove beetles, carrion beetles, hister beetles, and dermestid beetles can all be found at different stages in decomposition. Another group of insects are the lepidopterans. These are the butterflies. Lepidopterans are characterized by scales on their wings that assist in lift and drag, and also serve as an anti-predator defense. The scales fall off easily and make the wings slippery. The scales also serve as a palette for coloration. These colors can serve as signals or camouflage. As a signal, the colors can either indicate that the lepidopteran is toxic or can indicate its species to other lepidopterans. Another feature of lepidopterans are the proboscis. We've already covered this a bit when talking about pollination syndromes, but we'll touch upon it again. Here you can see a sphingid moth uncurling its proboscis as it approaches an agapanthus flower. Once it's fully uncurled, it can then sip the nectar from the tubular corolla of a lot of different species of flower. In the example we saw before, the existence of this species of sphingid moth was predicted simply by looking at the anatomy of this flower. The next group of insects we'll talk about are the dipterans, or the flies. Flies are another group that is important in forensic entomology. If you're going to get into forensics, it'd be helpful to get a good handle on both fly and beetle life histories. Here you can see several different species that are associated with corpses in Western Australia. Another group of insects are the hymenopterans, the bees, wasps, and ants. Bees, wasps, and ants are often pollinators. They're also highly social and experience distinct caste systems that we call eusociality. The eusociality of hymenopterans is a really interesting feature. We don't have time to cover it in this class, but it's worth a closer look. One example of hymenopterans are the euglossine bees. In order to attract females, male euglossine bees collect incredible scents from different flowers all around the forest. Whenever they find a scent that they enjoy, they use brush-like front arms to pull the scent and tuck it away in pockets on their rear legs. You can see that pocket on this example on the bottom right.